Hi, and welcome back to this web tutorial of Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2018. In this episode, we'll cover creating a timeline, making basic cuts, making basic edits, and a few other things as well. Last episode, we imported all of our media, and now it's time to go ahead and get started. There's a few ways I can create my timeline and begin editing my clips together. The first and simplest is to just simply click and drag a clip from your media browser over into your timeline. This will by default create a default timeline, allowing you to play your clip as well as add extra clips. I'm going to go ahead and just use Control Z here. I'm on a PC. Mac would just be Command Z. And step back to show you a different way. So the next way I'm going to show you to import media from your media browser into your timeline will be this source monitor in the upper left-hand corner. Now you notice when we start out, nothing is here. We need to click on a clip and click and drag up into this window. And now we have this playhead here, this represented by this blue dot. And we can also click play and stop with this visual on-screen button, or just use the space bar as well to begin or stop playing the footage. So this way we're going to use these two markers, mark in and mark out. You can also use the I or O key on your keyboard to do this. And I'm going to just go ahead and take a look at the whole clip here. So actually, I think I want to cut this before people start to walk into the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and select this point as my out point and leave the in point where the video starts. I can continue doing this with multiple clips for this video example. I would like to cut before I get over again to people walking in the corner. So I'm going to go ahead and make this my out point. And I think I want to start a little bit later too, so I'm going to go ahead and make this my in point. You can continue doing this for all of the videos in your project panel. As you can see here, my selections are still marked per clip. And now when I click and drag, we will only have the parts that we selected. You notice that this cuts off again before the full clip actually ended. Same for this secondary clip. We cut before the people start coming into the frame. And so this can be a streamlined way as well to pre-cut all of your files and then simply drag and drop them in the sequence that you want. Okay, so we want to go ahead and start building our sequence. From this point on, I'm going to be dragging and dropping into the timeline, but feel free to pre-edit your clips as I just showed you. So we already imported these two clips. One more thing to note is that by simply clicking on the name of any clip, you can rename that clip. And this comes in handy when you have a lot of clips, such as I do right now, and it's not uncommon to have even more clips than this in a common project. So for example, here I can click and title this pan right window, or whatever helps me remember which clip is which clip. I'm going to continue adding clips here. So we brought in these two already. I'm going to go ahead. I know I want this clip already. And I also know I want that clip already. As well as this clip and this clip. Okay, so we have a bunch of clips dragged into our timeline. A little bit out of order. I'm going to go ahead and mute our audio track for now. So we have all of our clips here, but if you notice, they're all out of order. It's still not a very coherent project. If your only goal was to bring clips in and put them right back out, then here you go. But I want to restructure this in a way that makes a little bit more sense. So first off, I have this pan down for this shot from the church, or I'm sorry, from the sky to this religious building. And I also have a pan down from the sky to this sculpture. And what I want to do is actually overlap those sky shots so we have a nice transition. So a simple way I can do this is, and what I actually want to do is line those sky shots up so it provides a nice transition. So they're actually a little bit out of order now. I actually want to drag this clip behind this clip. I can click and drag clips around. If you notice, I can drop this behind that clip. If you also notice though, we had a clip there to begin with in this space, and when I dragged and dropped, it simply overwrote that clip. And that's not what we want to happen. So there's two things I can do here. This bar at the bottom is both a scroll for the timeline. It is also a zoom if I grab either end of this bar and zoom in or zoom out. It can be very handy to zoom out to your project to jump to a different place, and then to zoom back in to make a very specific cut. So there's a couple things I can do here. I can click and grab all of these and drag them down to give myself a little bit more space, and drag this to the other side, select both and bring them back up, select these and also bring them back up. I'm going to Control Z out of all of those actions and show you a second way. I can also grab these clips and simply move them up one row. You start with 3 video layers and 3 audio layers. You can add as many as you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and drag those clips up to the second layer. And that way I can drag this clip here, grab these again, pull them over here, and go ahead and drag these and drag them right back down. Okay, so now that I have these 2 clips where I want them, these 2 clips right here, they're still not lined up. It goes from sky to ground and from sky to ground. And so what I need to do is reverse one of these clips so it goes ground, sky, sky, ground, and provides a nice clean transition that way. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on this first clip, and just so I know it's selected, it gives me a highlighted when I click it. And so I'm going to go ahead and right click on speed duration, and just select reverse speed. And I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And all that's going to do is reverse this clip and reverse its direction. So now when we watch, it goes from ground to sky and from sky to ground. And so this will provide an easier transition throughout the video. I'm going to go ahead and select these. I'm going to drag them up one row because I have some more work to do here. I have this first shot and it's a pan to the right. And I have this fourth shot here, also a pan to the right. And I want these two together, similar as to how the up and down pans are together. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that over and come down and drag these clips back over here. So now I have this pan right and this pan right. I have an up and I have a down. And I'm still working on these shots here. So let's get started on that. This clip in particular is a little long, it's a little shaky with the pans. I don't need another sky pan right now. So again, I could use my source monitor to trim it down. I can also use the razor tool. So notice here by default your selection tool, this arrow is selected and that allows you to select clips and move them around freely. But you can go ahead and select the razor tool or use the C key on your keyboard. And I can scrub my playhead through this clip and find the area I want. So I don't want this beginning part. I sort of want where this just comes here. And so you notice that the razor will snap to the playhead, which is nice. I can just find the area I want and cut it there. And I want to cut it as it's panning up here. And so I'm going to cut it there. And so I can come back to my selection tool or use V on my keyboard and select either side of that and just use backspace or delete to delete those 2 clips. And now we just have this shorter version. One more way you can shorten or extend clips. If I hover over the end of a clip, you notice I get a little red bracket with an arrow. If I click and drag that bracket in, I'm going to go ahead and find the place I want it again. If you click and drag that bracket in, it will snap to your playhead just like that. I'm going to go ahead and find that location again and click here. And again, we have a shortened clip. Now, the nice thing about this way, and actually all of the editing ways I've shown you so far, anytime you've shortened a clip with a razor or just using the brackets, you can still grab the end of that clip with the red bracket and drag it back out. That video is never gone, and it will still be here. If you made a mistake, you overshot, you did something wrong, you can always come back and change that. I actually don't want to change that. I want to come back and keep that. So I'm going to make those cuts one more time. I'm going to come to this last clip. And I think I just want this where it starts, just before it starts to pan. So I'm going to select right here. And I'm going to leave that to the end. So I'm going to select this clip and drag it back up. And this clip and drag it back up. Okay, so I'm going to scrub through this really quick and see what I have. Okay, great. This is turning out to be a little more structured than we started out with. But it's still a little rough around the edges, and what I want to do next is use a few effects and transitions to really smooth this video out. So far, we've been working in the editing panel. You want to make sure you're following along here, and that you are also on the editing panel. We have a few panels up here: effects, color, audio, graphics, and they all do different things. If I click from the editing panel to the effects panel, you notice my display changes. And what I have over here is a list of all of my effects: audio effects, video transitions, audio transitions, and presets. So there's two ways I can get here. From the editing panel in our project window, we can come over and click effects and access it the same way here. I can also, this is a more streamlined way to have all of the assets here. So specifically between this sky shot, it's a little rough, a little jumpy where this section of tree disappears when it moves to the next clip. So what I want to do is use a cross dissolve. So I'm going to come to video transitions, dissolve, and cross dissolve. And before I do this, I'm actually going to zoom in on this transition right here. And I'm just going to grab this cross dissolve and drag it and drop it right over the two ends of this clip. Sometimes you get this warning. I'm just going to click out of it. You can see now that this provides a much smoother transition for this clip. I can do the same thing we did earlier, which is click this and I get these red brackets, and I can extend this cross dissolve out to be longer if I so choose. I can also double click this little bar and it gives me a time marker where I can enter a specific value if I want. I'm going to go ahead and leave that how it is. I'm going to come here and I'm going to do actually the same thing here. This cut is a little jumpy, so I'm going to drop a cross dissolve right on the end of this clip. I'm actually going to make that a little bit longer. All right. I think these two cuts are okay as jump cuts or as these quick cuts because they're not meant to be as smooth as these, which have a little more symmetry. You notice we do have a cold open and a hard end where the video just stops and it starts abruptly. So this is a common thing I do for most of my videos. I'm going to come up to video transitions, again under dissolve, and I'm going to select dip to black this time. So I'm going to zoom in here to the beginning of my clip and just drop this dip to black right on the beginning there. I'm also going to come to the very end of my video and I'm going to drop the same thing right on the end of that clip. Again, by using the brackets or by double clicking, we can adjust the length of this fade. And this is simply going to mean it's going to fade from black in the beginning and to black in the end. And it's a little smoother way to start and end your videos instead of a cold open and a hard cut at the end. Next, we need a title. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to come back to my editing panel and come here to my project window. And down here at the bottom right, we have this little page icon and it says new item. I'm going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to come back down here to my project panel. So I'm going to come back down here to my project panel. And actually what I'm going to do is come up to File, Import, and I have a couple photos. I'm going to import this photo. And since it's a photo, it defaults to a value of 4 seconds and 29 microseconds. But that is, again, changeable. Since it's a photo, it can be as long or as short as we want it to be. So I just pulled this logo from the internet. And what I'm actually going to do first is come back to my effects panel and do the same thing. I'm going to add a dip to black in the beginning and a cross dissolve at the end. And this way, instead of, just going to go ahead and get rid of this so you can see, instead of, as this is fading to black, this logo is still just here. So I'm going to add this dip to black in the beginning. That way the logo fades in, the same as the video does, and fades away nicely as well with this cross dissolve at the end. Okay. I can add text to this picture. I can also, if I wanted to create a blank title in the editing panel or effects, but just in this project window, we can come down to the bottom right and say new item. I can say black video, and it'll ask me the dimensions. These are the dimensions I'm working with, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I can also drag this in as I so choose. Now I can come here, and we've covered the selection tool and the razor tool, but down here there's a type tool. And if I click that, it gives me a text tool. So I'm actually going to come back to our video here. And I can click and drag a text window. And it gives me all of the same options as any regular word processor. So I have font and regular, bold, italic, size, justify, left, right, center. I have kerning, tracking, space between lines, space between letters, space between words, fill, stroke, shadow, a ton of options here to control what sort of text you're making. So I'm going to go ahead and type. I'm going to say a walkthrough tutorial. And I'm going to go ahead and change the font to something simple. And now I should be able to just click and drag by coming back to my selection tool, this around. I can come back to my text tool, click in this again, select it all. I can change the color. I'm going to take it back to white. And you notice this also creates its own item. I'm going to delete this black video. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a cross dissolve, at least on the beginning and on the end. And it's not quite lined up actually, so I'm going to make this a little bit longer. Need to zoom in, select the clip, a little longer. There we go. Now those are fading in unison. You notice this looks blurry until I pause it. This is because I have a preview quality set to 1/4. You can choose to play back video at full quality. Just know that it creates a harder stress on your computer. So if you're trying to preview images and it's being very jumpy and not showing you every frame, you probably want to click this and drop this down to at least 1/2 or 1/4. Every now and then you get the option for an 1/8 or a 1/16 as well. And that is just your preview resolution. That has nothing to do with the resolution of your final output video. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out here. I could do the same thing I wanted at the end. If I wanted to add credits, I could create a black video or just a text over a normal video. If I'm still on my text tool, so just on any video, I can click and drag, and it's going to create this text box that I can then maneuver however I want. So I could say, producer, director, actor, etc. I'm going to just use Control A and delete. I'm going to select this and also delete. I'm going to just zoom out here and scrub through one last time. Not one last time. If you notice, what we're missing is audio. So the audio from these actual recordings isn't very interesting. It's a windy day, it's kind of noisy, and a lot of just background conversation. So I went ahead and found a free, copyright-free song on the internet to add to this clip to make it a little more jazzy. So I'm going to go ahead and import that by coming to File, Import, locating my folder I made, and I'm going to come into my raw audio and select this background music file, click Open. I'm going to come back to this editing panel instead of this effects panel. And you notice now I have this background music file right here. So I'm just going to click and drag this on this audio track under all of my clips and unmute here. Okay, it's not perfect, but I think this will do for this video. And so I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to the video length right there by just using my bracket. Again, you want to consider that the audio now has a cold open and a hard cut at the end. So I'm going to come back to this effects panel, and I'm going to close this panel for video transitions and come into audio transitions. Here I only have one folder option, and within it 3 options: constant gain, constant power, and exponential fade. So I'm going to zoom into the end of my clip here and drop a exponential fade option right onto the end of the audio track. Great, and that's going to fade, as you notice, with the visuals as well. The dip to black for visuals is the same as the fade on the audio, and so that's nice and synced up. I'm going to come here and zoom in to the beginning of the clip and add a constant power option to the beginning of that clip there. Great, so now both the video and audio eases in and eases out, has a few transitions throughout, and is looking a lot better overall. Okay, great. So I want to start on some of the other options that Premiere offers. First of all, I'm going to click and drag and select both my audio track and my video track. Since I didn't bring audio in with my videos, by default they have no audio, and I was able to freely add my own audio. Usually when you bring a clip in, if it has audio attached, you'll need to detach it before you can add other audio clips. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now by doing it a little bit in reverse. So I am going to select these 2 clips and just right click, and I get this option for link. And so now these are linked, and when I move one, the other moves with it. This is how all clips will start out normally. And so I'm going to go ahead and select those and say unlink. And now I can move each one independently of each other. So if you were replacing audio or cutting audio, this would be the way to do it, to right click and say either link or unlink. Okay, so I want to get started on some of the color options that Premiere provides. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of editing or effects, now that I have everything, I'm going to go ahead and mute this again, everything in order, the way that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and come up to my color panel here. And you notice I don't have any options. I can't click anything until I select a certain clip. So I'm going to make sure I'm on the clip that I want. I'm actually going to move out of this really quick. And so now I do have options. And so the main panel we're going to use here is basic correction. And this is the first panel and the one that is open by default. If you come down, there are a few more options: creative, color wheels, HSL secondary, and vignette. Feel free to explore those on your own or look up other tutorials. But since this is a beginner video, we're going to stick with basic correction. LUTs are presets applied to raw video that helps them look better from the get-go. Since we're already working with color-corrected footage, we don't need to worry about these here, but if for some reason you were shooting with one of these cameras, Alexa or Arri, Phantom, you could use one of these presets built in. This isn't looking bad so far, but I want to go over some of the color options we have. So first of all, we have a temperature slider. So if I slide this left, you can see it gets much cooler. And if I slide it to the right, it gets much warmer. So it's actually not bad to begin with, so I'm going to leave it here in the center. Next is tint, much greener or much more violet. And so these can work together. You might need it more blue and more violet, or you might need it more yellow and more green, or any combination of those things in between. So you can start by using your eyes. What I like to do is look at whites and skin tones. So here we have a nice white wall, and here we have a few, they're images, but we have a few images of skin tones as well, as also a few nice whites. And these are usually dead giveaways here as well. And here we have a few people as well. And these are usually dead giveaways of if your color is wrong. Whites will very easily look too cool or too warm, so will skin tones. So it look too red or too blue. And so a good way to do this, you can use your eyes in these sliders. You also are provided a WB selector or white balance selector here. So if you click this eyedropper, you can drop this on anything that is supposed to be white in a scene. So here I have this wall, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see it's not a huge change. I'm just going to undo it and do it again. But it makes an adjustment for what it thinks that that should be based on if that is pure white, it's going to adjust that to pure white. So I can come and do the same thing here. Sometimes, since this is in shadow, naturally that white is a little bit cooler. So here it actually made it a little bit too warm. So this is a bit of an auto option. It doesn't always work for your scene, but is worth a shot for each scene. Below we have exposure, so brighter or darker for the whole image. Contrast, more contrasty or less, very flat and very heavy. Highlights will only adjust the brightest parts of the picture, so the highlights of the picture. So bringing this up will make those brightest parts even brighter, and bringing them down will make those brighter parts less bright. So this can be helpful if you have a scene that is too bright and someone's wearing a white t-shirt. You can bring those highlights down and get some of that data back. Shadows is the same thing, but in reverse. It only affects the darkest parts of the images. So here you can see under this roof, we have a shadow here. So if I bring this down, we lose shadow detail, and it makes those shadows darker. If I bring this up, we gain shadow detail, and it's going to brighten those shadows. Whites, slightly similar to highlights, but will adjust just any whites in the photo. Same with blacks, similar to shadows, but will adjust any blacks in the photos, not just shadows. And finally, saturation. If I drag this all the way to the left, we have a black and white video, no saturation, and all the way to the right, a super saturated video. I feel okay about most of my video clips here, so I don't need to do any huge corrections, but these are definitely powerful tools to help you correct any sort of color imbalance that you may have. Okay, so I have things just about wrapped up, but I think the audio needs just a little more attention. If I play this back from the beginning, it's pretty loud. You can tell by looking at this audio meter to the right that when it hits the top, it turns red and will stay that way until you click it off again. And this is to let you know that your audio levels are peaking. They're louder than what can be represented on a speaker, and so you'll be losing data. And so the song is a little bit loud. So there's a few things we can do here. First of all, by default, your audio track is a little smaller. I'm just gonna go ahead and hover here and grab that line and bring this down so we can see these waveforms a little better. Next, in the center here, I have a line that I can simply click and drag, and if I drag it down, it becomes quieter. And if I drag it up, it becomes louder. And that is certainly not what we want. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring it back down to 0 and just down a little bit. Just so that we're not peaking here in the loudest times of the audio. Yeah, just so we're not peaking during the loudest times of the audio. Okay, so we're gonna zoom back out. One more audio tip. We have a whole audio window up here. So we already covered editing, color, and effects. So under audio, I can now come, and this is now a workspace designated to be more helpful to audio work. So you see here, I have audio track 1, 2, and 3. If I was layering sounds or had many tracks, you would also see a preview for those tracks when they are playing here. And a few navigation controls also worth noting. We have M here on the audio window and also here on the audio track. If you hover over it, it says mute, and that is exactly what it is. It is simply a mute button for a track. And beside it is S. We have S here and up here, and that is the same thing but opposite. Solo, if you solo a track, it mutes everything except the track that you soloed. It is solo playing. You can you can solo different tracks at the same time. And that way you can listen to 1 or 2 or 3 tracks instead of all 20 without having to go and individually mute all 20 audio tracks if you're working with that many. Cut. Okay. Also, up here we have a L and R along with this dial right here, and these are panners for left and right. If I only wanted the sound to come out of the right speaker, I would turn this 100% to the right, and if I only wanted it out of the left, I would turn this to -100 or over to the left-hand side. And this isn't always useful, but can be pretty useful in some situations. Okay, thank you for joining me for this video. Things are coming along nicely. In the next video, we'll cover exporting.